And we're live.
We're live.
Hello!
La, la, la. Hello, all. Welcome. It is Monday afternoon. It's Generational Change. I'm Jen.
I'm Peter. And how many different crazy stories can we possibly have thrown at our feet over the weekend?
Well, there's always stuff, but you want to talk about the anniversary of the darkest day in American history? Our most solemnest, darkest day ever in American history, apparently.
We've been led to believe that there are no days more terrible than that of January 6th. And again, it's not like something we want to talk about, but it is something that becomes relevant because that's all the people in power within the Biden administration want to talk about.
That's why it's so newsworthy.
They think that that's the only way that they're going to get Joe reelected. The absurdity of where we are today can best be summed up by the fact that January 6th was bad, but to suggest that it was worse than Pearl Harbor and 9/11 combined.
Is that what he said, really? Because I haven't heard this speech. I don't want to hear this crap.
You've brought this up, and I think it's important for people to understand. And I know that there are others. I think our friends at Due Distance have brought it up as well. What did you think was going to happen on January 6th if, let's say, they breached the Senate chambers? Did you think that they were going to hold up the government and that somehow Joe Biden was not going to be president and that Donald Trump was going to be installed as president again and that everything was just going to be accepted as fact and that nothing would change? I don't remember a single person showing up on January 6th with guns. And you would think usually if you're going to, do a coup, that you're going to need some type of artillery in order to accomplish such a feat.
Oh, the January 6th coup. Yes. It was absurd then, and it's absurd that we're still talking about it now. It was an act of violence against people and vandalism against property that should be prosecuted accordingly.
Yeah.
But to think of it that it was any real threat to democracy is absolutely absurd. If you are someone that truly thinks that there was a threat to our institutional democracy, like when I say democracy, I don't mean I think we have an actual democracy, but to our institutions of government, let's say, then you need to get way better educated. Because here's the thing, historically speaking, the only way that coups work is if you have a military. You have to have the military.
That is willing to go along with it.
Correct. If you do not have a military, you do not have a coup. And here's the thing, Trump never had the military.
No, frankly, he probably never had it.
No, well, that's the thing. Never had the military. In fact, he still talks about how they didn't want to do what he wanted to do. He didn't have the military. There was never an actual threat to our democracy. There was a threat to people like AOC and Nancy Pelosi. Absolutely. Yes. And that should be prosecuted accordingly. It was definitely a mob. It was terroristic. And it was violent. All of those things are true, but none of it, to me, was remotely serious enough to be taken as a real threat to our institution.
Which is why this idea, and now it's obviously been brought to pretty much everyone's attention, that the Supreme Court is going to hear the case regarding Donald Trump and whether or not he is eligible to remain on the ballot in the state of Colorado, which is going to come up at I think it's like the second week of February.
I got to tell you, I don't even know how shocked I'd be if they said he's not eligible. They're going to find a way to put him back on the ballot without them actually physically putting him back on the ballot. Because first of all, if I were on the Supreme Court and I was hearing this, based on what I know of the 14th Amendment, I wouldn't allow them to remove him from the ballot.
The fear is
just wouldn't.
The fear is that the Supreme Court is going to basically allow the states to decide whether he's eligible to be on the ballot. And let me tell you something. That is the Supreme Court really throwing gasoline on the fire because the Democrats are stupid enough in every blue state to kick him off, and basically every red state's going to. Now, I don't think that'll happen in every state. I think what will happen is that in the true blue states, if the Supreme Court gives it back to the people, it will be the true blue states that will kick him off. Like a state like California will kick him off the ballot.
Of course they will.
State like Illinois will kick him off the ballot. I don't think a state like Pennsylvania or a state like Michigan would.
But what's so interesting is that the people that you were talking about that are going to kick Trump off the ballot, right? These people are doing one of the most undemocratic, no due process, absolutely a complete travesty. It's like, this is a mockery of anything remotely democratic. And yet these are the same people that will have you believe that January 6th was a threat to our democracy, while they are unilaterally throwing people off ballots without due process.
If Gavin Newsom says that you should beat Trump at the ballot box, if Gavin Newsom is saying
well,
that,
maybe they won't throw him off the ballot in California.
Well, maybe
the truth is, it doesn't matter in California. So that's the truth.
I guess not. But ultimately,
I mean, it matters as far as principle, but in terms of like what happens results wise, it won't matter.
Here's what the commander-in-chief had to say.
Today we gather in a new year, some 246 years later, just one day before January 6th. A date forever shared in our memory because it was on that day that we nearly lost America, lost it all. Today, we're here to answer the most important of questions. Is democracy still America's sacred cause? Jill and I attended the funeral of police officers who died as a result of the events of that day. Because of Donald Trump's lies, they died because these lies brought a mob to Washington. He told the crowd to fight like hell, and all hell was unleashed. He promised he would right them. And now these MAGA voices who know the truth about Trump on January 6th have abandoned the truth and abandoned the democracy. They made their choice. Now the rest of us, Democrats, independents, mainstream Republicans, we have to make our choice. I know mine, and I believe I know America's. We'll defend the truth, not give in to the big lie.
Oh, I know my choice.
Joe.
Joe.
You've lost the plot, pal.
Oh my God. How ridiculous. Okay.
We almost lost America.
We almost lost America.
We almost lost America.
By,
no, America's already been lost, by the way, if we're being honest.
By a bunch of people without weapons breaking and entering. We almost lost America.
Yeah,
I think that is so ridiculously hyperbolic, and it's so clear that that's all they have.
Well,
all they have is fear-based.
But that also makes it a lot more dangerous. See, he's the one making it more dangerous by going out there and basically saying that the world is coming to an end.
It is this way.
You stir people into such a frenzy. You know, if you're totally listening to me, I told you the election's rigged in this country, blah, 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 blah. But you literally will, when you think about the liberal mindset,
I try not
and
to.
The fact that they're so over emotional when it comes to this type of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Think about what you're doing to people like that are really believe that Trump is the Antichrist. Like this carnival barker.
Yeah, well, that's what they want. I mean, that's the thing. So this is a clear sign. When what we're seeing in the news is this and Trump, that's a sign that the people doing that have no better solutions. They got nothing for you. They have nothing. They have no ideas. They have no strategy. They have no nothing. And you know what? They don't care to. So this is just so much easier for them. It just gives them such fodder to not have to come up with solutions. But anybody who truly thought January 6th was an actual, and I mean an actual real threat to America, I don't mean to the people in the building and to that, then seriously, you are really stupid. You just are. I'm sorry. That is just one of the dumbest things you could possibly believe. Have you not ever seen what happens in other countries when there's actual coups? Am I the only person that has seen this in places like in Africa and South America, Latin, wherever it is? If you've ever seen any news with a coup involved, there's a military. Now, sometimes it's the private army versus the national army. It's this army versus that army. There's different factions of military, but there's a military in place with weaponry. And there was never that on January 6th. You had a bunch of morons breaking and entering with a few violent people with them. And that's the extent of it. And people got hurt, and that's really horrible. And I'm glad people got prosecuted, because really, if you're that stupid, you should. And really, I don't even feel that bad for people that got themselves killed that day that were willingly participating. To anybody that wasn't willingly participating that got hurt, that's That's
something as simple before we bring in our wonderful guest, Katherine Bogen. I thought without question that there would be something substantial that the Biden administration would pass in terms of domestic policy that would make sense on the surface for people economically.
You mean like during an election year doing things that might help people?
Something like that.
No, we can't have that.
Everyone gets caught up with canceling student debt. But to me, what's infinitely more important than that is having tuition-free public college and trade schools.
Otherwise, there's no point in canceling student debt.
Because once you have tuition-free public college and trade schools, and by the way, they've done cost-benefit analysis against this many, many times over. It's like 7 times the benefit to actually having that passed. It would cost less than 1% of the annual federal budget. That's all it would cost, about $58 billion. And you're talking about $1.7 trillion in student debt. And that's if you had searched all your energy into, we got to have tuition-free public college and trade schools. And then from that point on, you could clearly phase out student debt. It would no longer be a topic. But again, it's like being on the hamster wheel. It's like taking advantage of voters through, the repeal of Roe v. Wade and keep getting them to think that this is how it's going to work over and over and over again. It's like down here when they told us that, we have enough signatures for, getting Roe v. Wade on the ballot in Florida.
And they did. We had made our mark in Broward. Yeah. And so we had, at one point, he and I stopped collecting because we hit our mark here.
Sure. And
I wasn't sure they were going to get him in all the other counties.
But ultimately, we have to stop living in fear.
But we did. We got it, guys. So that's big news. Yes. Us in Florida are one step closer to getting our bodily autonomy back.
Bottom line, if you take initiative instead of waiting on the government to do it, you might actually get somewhere. I guess that's kind of what we're saying.
Yeah.
So without further ado, we are very pleased to welcome a real Jewish voice for peace.
Yes.
Because she has built herself quite a following, particularly on Instagram, and speaking truth to power. And as I have said, and this is really more Jen's issue and obviously Katherine's issue, it's the Jewish community that needs to fight this fight. And they ultimately have to take the reins on the fact that—
I love how you keep disregarding the fact that you are Jewish.
I'm Jewish on my mother's side.
That's the side that counts with Jews. Jesus, dude.
I'm not
you had a bar mitzvah. All right, whatever.
Not wanted.
Okay, fine, whatever.
Anyway.
He's Irish Catholic.
I do not know, and I'm not Catholic either. I do not identify with an organized
And that's
religion.
the side of the family that you're going to go with. Whatever.
My point, you really are a Jewish mother. Like, it's ridiculous how much of a Jewish mother you are. My point is, this particular issue it needs to be driven by people in the Jewish community who are saying not in our name, because the conflation of Zionism to Judaism is something that's going.
He doesn't have the level of rage I have about this.
Oh, no.
Not anywhere near the level of rage. He wasn't used as a tool in ethnic cleansing, whereas I was, so.
Well, if anybody could speak to it, this lovely lady can. Katherine Bogen, welcome to Generational Change.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really delighted to be here.
Hi, I came across you on Instagram, where people know I'm not on social media interactively. I'm a voyeur. Like, our site is run by him. But I have my own little thing on Instagram, and I found you on Instagram, and I just found you to be so lovely. And I don't know if it was you were doing a poem, or you sing, or you're all this stuff. And here's the thing: as a Colorado Buffalo from the days when we were the Big Eight, I will not hold it against you that you're in Nebraska.
Yes, is that?
Okay. But what I really and I love, and I just feel like you are on the same page with what we're trying to do here, and a lot of the message you get out. And I love the fact that you're studying trauma. And I think that this is a very, very important thing. So this is why I specifically wanted to speak with you out of other Jews that we've had on Jews for Peace, because I've been saying this for a long time, that the post-Holocaust trauma, and I come from this, I was raised very Zionist in South Florida. Like, that was just, everything was about Israel. That was it. So it was this very fear-based post-Holocaust sort of mindset. And I was wondering if that's something you've given considerable thought to in doing the work you're doing, like how we're still dealing with that here.
Yeah, absolutely. I do think, so I work as a trainee trauma therapist. I'm a fourth year doctoral student in clinical psychology, and my treatment focus is on post-traumatic stress disorder among primarily sexual trauma survivors. But I think the logic of PTSD really applies, obviously, to the Holocaust, as well as the logic of intergenerational trauma and epigenetic trauma. And I think folks in our generation and kind of the millennial population has some privilege compared to our parents and our aunts and uncles, because we are one generation removed from the proximity of trauma of the Holocaust. Right. And so our epigenetics have actually had a little bit more space and latitude to heal. And we don't have that same physiological stress response when Israel-Palestine is brought up. And I've spoken to members of my family about this who are themselves more Zionist or more concerned about the mass extermination of Jews, where when Israel-Palestine comes up, they have a trauma response, a physiological trauma response in their bodies, where all of a sudden their heart starts to beat faster and they're sweating and their faces get flushed and they are going into fight or flight as they discuss Israel-Palestine. And for me, when I discuss Palestinian liberation and the end to the political project of Zionism, very little happens in my body. I don't notice that my heart is racing. I don't notice that I'm sweating. I feel physically safe and comfortable as I consider the possibility of Palestinian liberation. And I think our aunts and uncles, our Zadis and Bubbies and all the elder generation of our family, they don't have that privilege of the feelings of physical safety when this conversation comes up. And that trauma response that is sparked turns off the cognitive and emotional latitude they would otherwise have to consider Palestinian liberation from a perspective of compassion and empathy.
Right.
And in this way, I really think the younger generation of diaspora Jews or Jews living outside of the historic land of Palestine, we have privilege, and I think we need to use it in this conversation.
That's what I think. Just like I think it's white people's responsibility to educate themselves and train other white people about race issues, it's the same thing. But I feel like I've been tiptoeing with the Israel thing for a couple of years from when I had officially crossed over into it took me about 10 years to completely deprogram, I would say, from start to finish. And I am finished. Like, I could not be more finished. It's like, put a fork in me. And so I have less and less sympathy because we have access to more and more information. So when I was 16, you're young, and I know, but when I was 16, I was in Israel in a program called High School in Israel. It's Alexander Muss. Are you familiar with Alexander Muss High School in Israel? No. It's one of many tentacles of the JNF, whatever. Yeah. So it's a program that we spend. You spend 6 weeks, you study the history, then you go see it. Of course, now I know that most of what I learned was not even true, but which let's take that off, the table. They had us, of course, always out planting trees. We're all planting trees. And I never stopped to think about, why do we have to plant so many trees? And then you start to sort of look at the mythology, and I realized I was somewhere in an occupied place that I ought not have been, planting trees over what was probably at one point a flourishing, nice farmland that they destroyed and completely demolished. And so that's why I'm now there planting trees with armed guards. And yet these are the people that talk about human shield. So as someone who was a human shield, and since I have a lot of rage, I'm sorry. And so, yeah, no, you notice I have a lot of rage. But I truly believe that the lack of information was a huge difference. When I was growing up, we didn't know these things. My parents didn't know, my grandparents, it wasn't like they knew and they kept it from me. We didn't have the access, but now what's people's excuse?
Yep. Yeah, I absolutely agree. I was raised similarly in a very Zionist household, and every Passover Seder we talked about, next year in Israel, this glittering promised land, land without a people for people without a land, etc. And I did not even hear the word Palestine once in my life until I was maybe 17 years old. I started college at 17, and I got involved in sort of leftist and progressive organizing. And I was hearing other Jewish activists use the word Palestine, and I had just never heard it before. And at the same time, I had friends and family going on birthright. And I knew enough when they got back from Birthright, which in and of itself, that name
Whoa.
is horrific. I know.
The name is infuriating. Yeah, I know.
It's really disgusting.
I know.
They were getting back from this terribly named trip, and I knew enough to start asking the question, what did you learn about Palestine when you were there? What did people tell you about Palestine? And I had these people that I really loved, admired, and respected say, oh, do you mean the terrorists? And I was like, no, actually, that's not what I mean at all. I mean the people who are currently occupied. And so I knew around 17, 18 that I was going to go on Birthright. It was something my family had encouraged me to do, my community had encouraged me to do. I wanted to see Israel and see if I experienced this sort of glittery perfection that everyone had promised. But before I went, I took a whole series of courses on the topic just so that I wasn't going in blind, because I was very concerned that this was going to be a brainwashing effort. And I believe I was right to be concerned. So I took what I thought was a pretty balanced course load: Jewish experience, suffering and evil in the Jewish tradition, Middle East politics, and Arab-Israeli conflict, all within the political science and genocide studies program of my alma mater, my undergrad university. And I was a political science major. I was focused in comparative politics. So I took these 4 courses and also had courses on state struggles and apartheid, and kept hearing Israel brought up as an example of an apartheid system. And so by the time I finished this coursework and went on Birthright, I was so staunchly pro-Palestine, and my kind of liberatory politic had been developed. Oh, I can see your mouth moving, but I'm not sure.
No. I just wanted to make sure something got put in the description very quickly. I was listening. I was multitasking.
We were just talking shit about you.
I just said I make sure her social media handles in the description. That's all I said.
Perfect. No, you're totally fine. But I had taken this coursework and I was very staunchly pro-Palestine. And this is when my anger and my rage, I think, was really sparked of how was all of this information kept not only from me, but the older generation of my family, my grandparents, because I know I was raised by an ethical, progressive, sort of stereotypically liberal Jewish New England family. And if they had the information that I had, I know they would come to the conclusion to which I have come. And I think the anger that you feel is so mirrored by other Jews who are in the diaspora who have done that kind of unlearning, deprogramming process. And I also think, based on the trauma research that I have done, we've seen in sexual and gender-based violence prevention research that it is much more effective to target the perpetrators of violence with a deprogramming intervention than it is to target the victims. If we want to provide corrective information, we need to be giving that information to the Jewish folks in the diaspora who have not received that information, as opposed to the Palestinian activists and folks in the Palestinian diaspora who have known this and been saying this for 75 years. They need no more information. They know. They are rooted in the truth.
Yeah.
Right? So the deprogramming, I think, is really where the labor needs to be now. And that follows from the logic of violence prevention interventions that I've researched over my career.
Yeah. You know, I see these comments. I don't know why I even look. I'm not even going to look at the comments because there's always going to be people, you know. But it's truly fascinating to me to sort of watch this unraveling in real time. And I do, you know, as horrible as it is, I am thankful that we have been getting the information that we're getting, because I do think it is unraveling.
There's no coming back from this.
Yeah, there's no coming back from this. This is it.
This is the last ride, and they know it. And of course, it's been very financially beneficial for a lot of people for a very long time. And when you start taking away people's bread, even if it's ill-gotten bread, they're going to fight hard to keep it. There's no question.
I feel like it's in its death throes.
Here we go. No.
We're fine with pets. We're good with pets. Good but yeah, is that a black cat?
Yeah.
Yes, I have 2 of them. I
love black cats. And I don't even really love cats, but I really like black cats.
Yeah, don't mess with them.
I'm more of a dog person. But I mean, what's going on? I was in DC on November 4th for the march, and it was amazing. It was amazing. I've never seen anything like that ever. And so that to me shows a real sort of shift in the narrative. And even on shows like, if you're for anybody watching like Democracy Now, or, you know, stuff that isn't necessarily leftist stuff, you're getting a much more balanced perspective, right? Like we're seeing a lot more of sympathy for the Palestinian people than we ever saw in any past part of this conflict.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I've listened to a lot of crooked media over the years, Pod Save America, Love It or Leave It, and I was really expecting them to be more centrist on this issue, and that they are just starting to use language like apartheid, like genocide, like ethnic cleansing. And I'm like, thank you, let's call it what it is. And so to see this shift in more kind of liberal programming as opposed to leftist programming, I think has demonstrated the social contagion of truth. When people are able to hook into a change, how quickly that can be disseminated. And I'm seeing it in the older generation of my family and their social networks. I'm hearing about it in religious organizing spaces and in different synagogues and congregations where previously rabbis would not have spoken about Palestine at all. And now there are incorporations of prayer for Palestine and services.
Good.
Yeah.
Are you Reconstructionist?
Yeah, I was raised, so I grew up in a very, very small town in Connecticut, a town of about 8,000 people. And we had one Jewish community center, and it was a Hasidic Chabad. So I went to Chabad in a really, really conservative, like Orthodox space when I was growing up. And like the men sat in front of the rabbi at the bima, and the women sat behind this little divider off to the side. And it just, the gender politics of Hasidism was not for me. So I took some space away from Judaism and sort of recommitted to it when I was around 19 and went to Israel, but as a Reconstructionist Jew.
Right. Yeah, I find the Reconstructionist sect to be the least offensive of all the Jewish sects. And my son, who had a bar mitzvah, he wanted one. He asked for it. I had to actually go and join something for him to have that. And the Reconstructionist synagogue was definitely the coolest one. When I walked in there with my friend, and she had her daughter, and the woman in the office came up to us and assumed we were a family, assumed that we were a couple and these were our two kids, and walked right up to us and said, "Hi, welcome to Ramat Shalom," and handed me the application. And that's why I picked them.
Yep, 100%.
Yeah, you don't want to know my opinion. But
well, I'm not a fan of organized religion, but I'm saying if you have to participate, that's
the thing about groups like Pod Save America, the Obama boys. The fact of the matter is, the only reason they're shifting on the issue is because they know it's killing the Democrats when it comes to the general election, and they may not be able to get it back. So the way they see it is, we kind of have to ease into this issue now, because if we don't, we're really just handing this over to Trump without a fight. And so by that measure, they see it as a political necessity, whereas either you recognize genocide for what it is or you don't. You don't think about, oh, is this going to work for me politically or not? But I think that that's one of the big problems that we have here. And obviously you heard about Mehdi Hasan leaving MSNBC. But the truth of the matter is that type of stuff happens when you ultimately realize like who the bosses are. You know, you realize that people like Bill Ackman, they really are the ones who run the show, and their money does the talking for them. If they want somebody out in, let's say Harvard, for example, all they have to say is, okay, well, either you're out or money, bye-bye. And that's how it works. And that's how it's worked for many people in those positions for a long time. But I think that that's going to change as well.
I think that's a good sign right now. See, this is the thing. And that's what I wanted to transition to talking about. So let's say we're getting more and more Jews on board. We're getting more and more mainstream media to at least say the word Palestinian. Oh, and I wanted to tell you this. So when I was a kid, so this is in the 70s. And I remember at one point asking about, well, what's Palestine? I don't know how I heard. I don't even remember her. And it would have been the equivalent of like a nun slapping my hand with a ruler kind of response. Palestine isn't a real place. That's not real. And I was kind of like reprimanded. So it wasn't that I knew that it was a thing, but I knew that we weren't supposed to say that. Yeah. But now, because of that, I think things are changing. The censorship is off the charts, or at least the intent to censor. And what we're seeing in academia is incredibly scary to me. Yes. And the Jewish people that are in power positions, specifically in our Congress, there's not a single Jew in Congress on the correct side on this, not one.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's it's extremely upsetting. But they're using this to be authoritarian. They're using this as an excuse to do this. And so I feel like that's where we kind of almost need to focus right now, is on what's happening with a lot of that censorship.
Yeah, I think that is absolutely true. I had an experience when I first started speaking very publicly in support of Palestine and being very publicly critical of the Zionist project of the State of Israel. Two Zionist academics reached out to my mentors in my grad program and said, your mentee supports terrorism, your mentee delights in Jewish death, and if you don't do something to discipline her, we can reach out to the Board of Regents at her institution and petition to have her removed. Like, there was a threat to try to get my student status revoked as a doctoral student so that I could no longer finish my study. And then I also went to a professional conference several months ago, and it was in Seattle. And one of the days of the conference, there was a pro-Palestine march, literally like a 10-minute walk from the conference center. So I went and bought some poster making materials and set up outside of the expo center and said, there's a demonstration for Palestine tomorrow. If you want to make a sign, come with us. You can make your signs here. I brought all the materials, and then we'll leave at this time tomorrow. And a senior academic who was part of this organization posted about me on the listserv, trying to petition to get me removed from the organization. And I'm like, essentially all I did was provide art supplies. And the immediate harsh policing and use of punishment, this really sort of fascistic, punitively oriented response to any dissent is horrifying, especially because of the ethos of Judaism as a religion or a group that questions and that interrogates. It's this contravening of everything we've learned about our people. Like, we are supposed to do the research. We are supposed to be the dissenting voices. That's part of our cultural role, and that's part of what we've been taught in this community. And so to have that so viciously policed and accompanied with, you'll lose your spot in your doctoral program, you're not welcome in this professional organization anymore. The comparison of my behavior, it's been that I'm being violent. And so people said, she doesn't deserve to be a violence prevention scholar. She doesn't deserve to be a therapist. She doesn't deserve to be part of this professional organization that treats trauma. And the conflation of violence as someone providing art supplies being violent, or someone speaking in support of Palestine being violent, when we're seeing Palestinians be mass murdered and exterminated and forced out of their historic homeland at gunpoint, like, that is violence.
That's not true. They're just not getting out of the way of Hamas. That's it.
Oh my gosh. It's just the most absurd conflation. And it's like, okay, if you're really trying to say that what I am doing is violent while we are watching the attempt of a mass extinction, the cognitive dissonance must be so loud. It's horrifying.
Yeah.
But I would say that the Zionist impact on academia is
it's horrible. I feel like this is like another fight that has to be fought. Like, and I am not currently in academia. They wouldn't have me. I mean, look, I'd love to be teaching law. I would, but I realized a long time ago I would never get to that point because, if my fourth tier law school law professors went to first tier law schools and I go to a fourth tier law school, where the hell am I teaching? So I gave that dream up. But this is unacceptable, what's going on. But one of the things that really pissed me off so much was watching Claudine Gay not defend herself, and the one from Pennsylvania, and I don't remember the one from Penn, right? So when they're asked by this nasty shrew, when they're asked, does your school allow like genocidal threats against Jews? And it's like, why didn't one of them say, no, we wouldn't, but nobody said that? Why are they allowing what these student groups say, which is what we're all saying? No, it's the same thing. If you say from the river to the sea, and they also have issue with the word intifada. They have, because these are very ignorant people. But why, when somebody's given a platform, you're the president of fucking Harvard, and you're sitting there, this is an opportunity to school them. And instead, they just did it. And what did that get them?
Yeah.
I mean, I guess in her mind, she figured, well, I might end up having to resign, but at least this way I could keep my job. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I think something too that's sort of underexplored or undervalued here is the non-academic threats, the threats to safety, the death threats that people are receiving. Like, I spoke on a panel of anti-Zionist Jews for a Hanukkah event that was like, all I want for Hanukkah is a free Palestine. And someone got a hold of my cell phone number and the other speakers' cell phone numbers from this event and messaged us saying there are threats being made against Katherine Bogen on the dark web, and I would take these threats seriously. And so you're concerned not only for your career, and I am a little worried that my grad program is going to be reactive. They've been really supportive so far, and I'm grateful for that. But there's a breaking point for every institution.
How much longer do you have?
Correct, and I'm concerned about that. But I'm also concerned that someone will seek me out. I'm also concerned about threats to my safety. And I know that Claudine Gay, while all this was going on, was getting really, really violent personal death threats. So at the same time, I would want someone in a position of that much power and influence to say, let's provide some corrective information here.
Yes.
From the river to the sea doesn't actually mean we want a genocide of the Jewish people. It's advocating for the right of return for this entire state space, like for the entire geography.
But the one thing you have to remember is that, and I've seen the evolution happening in real time, they're not saying from the river to the sea as often as they did at the beginning. Now they're just saying free Palestine, and even that is being called anti-Semitic. So it's like you cannot allow them to define the narrative. The second you allow that is the second they perceive that they're eventually going to weather the storm on this issue. That's why people like Shmuley go around with their phone trying to, it's like the kid at Central Park who basically, we addressed this before, who probably recognized him, said, hey, free Palestine. Right. And that set him off to such a degree that he felt the need to turn on his phone and say, hey, this guy's threatening me, blah, blah, blah. And you're like, this kid's threatening you? You got, eventually enough people are going to see it and think, yeah, I'm not really buying that anymore. I kind of get the impression that what you guys are doing is really bad. It's so terrible that we have to look at it as, well, we just need more time. And all the while, the Palestinians are being genocided, the disease, the famine, everything. It's so unconscionable.
I actually don't think there's any way for them to come back from this, actually. Like they could cease fire now. And I still do not see how this is going to get rectified until we change the entire geopolitical setup there. And I think that when we say from the river to the sea, Palestine, I can tell you exactly what I mean. I mean that there should not be a geopolitical ethnostate that is a Jewish state. That is exactly what I mean. Does that mean I want to hurt the land and the people? No, I think they're lovely. And I think they should all just stay exactly where they are, whoever chooses to be there. But you don't get to be a white Russian Jew in the middle of Arabia and being annoyed that there's brown people around you.
What, so, you mean like Michael Rappaport?
I mean, like just any of it. I'm just disgusted. But so like my point is, so when I say the end of a Jewish state, I am not talking about the land and the people. And I'm sick of Jews conflating that.
A united Israel-Palestine.
Well, they don't want that. That's the bottom line.
This is actually a perfect transition because I decided to torture myself earlier today by listening to both Marianne Williamson and Dean Phillips in their presidential debate in New Hampshire.
Please.
And while there obviously are issues on the domestic side that are very, populist, progressive, and leaning in the right direction. When it came to foreign policy on Ukraine and especially on Israel-Palestine, they couldn't be more hawkish if they tried. And the idea that you concluded your statement with, and we must have a two-state solution. I was like, wow, they really don't know anything about what's going on.
Nothing.
Like, this is so beyond the pale at this point.
There could have been a two-state solution in 1948. There could have been that. That could have existed at one point. That's the truth.
Oh, stop living in 1948.
I'm just saying, at that point, it could have been possible. And anything prior to 1967, it could have been possible. But now it's ridiculous. And quite honestly, why does there need to be an ethnostate anyway? Why do we need an ethnostate?
Aside from that, it's also the fact that they say a two-state solution, as I've been saying, as when this conversation started, that a lot of the commentary that is made by a lot of these people like Pod Save America and the others that are connected to the DC Beltway, if you will, is that they're just looking at it from the perspective of what's going to work for us politically if we say it, not what's actually going to work for the Palestinian people. You are so far beyond that at this point. Like, you cannot. address it any other way.
Okay, this has to just be commented on. Katherine, you've got to see this.
Most nations on this planet are ethnostates, Jeff. Yeah.
Care to comment? Because I honestly, to me, the answer is extremely obvious. Bill, the Japanese people didn't come from another place and migrate over to Japan and kick out the indigenous people and make it be an ethnostate. They just are who they are. And like I've always said, if a whole bunch of white Jews found some place where no one else lived and they want to create their little hippie thing, have a commune, do whatever the hell you want. But that isn't what happened.
There is no point in really debating anybody.
Every place is an ethnostate. Oh, are you kidding me?
I mean, we had somebody on recently that basically is trying to give us talking points that, as far as I'm concerned, came directly from the U.S. State Department. It's like you eventually have to recognize that the way that anything is framed, I only know what I see with my own two eyes. If you are not on the inside, you don't know jack shit in the grand scheme of things about how geopolitics works, how mostly everything is fought over natural resources, money and power, nothing more. And ultimately, as our own president has said many times, and RFK has said as well, Israel is our outpost in the Middle East, and I quote from the President of the United States, if Israel didn't exist, we'd have to invent one in order to have one out there. So all the signs are there that this has been
I'm not averse to that existing. I'm just averse to it existing as it exists.
But as you said, there's been a Nakba, and
there's still a Nakba. We've never been in Nakba. That's the thing. See, people don't realize Palestinians are not PTSD. They're just TSD.
Also, I apologize. If we're getting so much snow, so there's a snowblower outside. You might be hearing that.
No, it's okay. What's TSD?
PTSD. Well, I know what PTSD is.
Well, they don't get the P. They've never had the P. They've been living the trauma all the time. There's no post.
Yep.
What post?
But I think that there's always been this idea, and somebody I think even suggested that if you really were going to create a Jewish state, you could have created it in Germany. Right?
Well, actually, yes. And that would have not only been acceptable, it would be probably thriving and nobody would care.
But this is
because they were Germans or closely related white allied Eastern Euro, my people are white people.
Yeah, the focus on sort of Ashkenazi settlement as well in the Levant and Ashkenazi settlement in Palestine. It's so clear that this was like a white supremacist land grab. And I know that people have a lot of concern about using phrases like white supremacy to describe what's going on with this ethno-nationalism in Palestine and in Israel. But I do think we have to highlight that it wasn't Sephardic Jews, it wasn't Mizrahi Jews, it wasn't Black and brown Jews, Ethiopian Jews, etc., that were brought to Israel and welcomed with open arms. It was Eastern European Jews. And so much of this project has been about incorporating Jewish power into hierarchies of whiteness, white hegemony, and white supremacy of we want access to this power pie as well. And so let's take the most whitest passing of our group and put them in a position to collaborate with other white supremacist nations, the United States and the UK. And it's been really effective in that so many Jews have taken the mantle of white supremacy and used their identity to police Black and brown populations. I mean, even the antipathy between Black people and Jews in the United States is horrifying.
Yeah. Well, you know what? At some point, and this is where I'm at now with like the Jewish people, you know, when are you going to be done being the victim? Because to me, it seems
it pays.
Well, and look, and to me, it seems, and there are real victims. Do not get, I mean, not to be, saying that, but I'm talking as a group. Okay. At what point do you get to stop being the victim? And let me be clear. I don't, look, anti-Semitism is not cool. I don't like it. But the truth is people aren't going to like us. They're going to hate us. They're going to say mean things. Our feelings might get hurt. Get over yourself. When there are institutions that are systemically anti-Semitic in place, a la like what we have here with race issues, then anti-Semitism becomes a real problem. Right now, you're just crocodile tears because people have been mean to us in the past. I get it.
Yeah.
But we're not the victims anymore. At what point do we stop?
And I do think let's place the blame even for anti-Semitism and rising global anti-Semitism where it belongs, which is on the shoulders of the Zionist ethno-national state of Israel. Every time Israel behaves as an aggressor, every time they are violent and abusive and genocidal, Global anti-Semitism rises because Israel insists that it is the national representative for all Jews everywhere, and then it does horrific shit that violates human rights of a marginalized group. And people think, oh, Jews are inherently violent. Jews are inherently oppressive. And so, of course, anti-Semitism rises because people are seeing a state that claims to represent Judaism do evil, grotesque things to children. Like, and people will turn around and claim blood libel and claim that, it's just...
But see, nobody's calling them out.
Yeah.
Oh, please invite me to come talk in Congress to you people. Please invite me to come talk to.
You'll have to be in Congress for that.
Let me just like, I don't understand why people. First of all, those people in Congress are our employees. They work for us. Okay, so why people cannot stand? I don't understand this. I really don't. And yes, I do understand the fear of getting death threats. Now, fortunately for you, you're in Nebraska, and the beauty of Nebraska is, unless there's something I don't know, it's probably not like a hotbed of Israeli activity. Whereas here in South Florida, I do actually think about it. Like for me, even I go to Pilates and I get the stink eye from half the people in the place. So like for me, I do kind of think about safety, but I'm still not going to not do what I'm doing.
Katherine, one of the biggest problems that we've encountered, and of course, if you don't know, Jen ran for Congress in 2020 against none other than Debbie Wasserman-Schultz, of course, the absolute
she's horrible, right?
The absolute worst of the worst of representation within the Jewish community, and yet she couldn't just be content with being the face of AIPAC, which she is. She decided that she was going to move heaven and earth because she can't pass any bills in Congress and never has in 20 years. But she was able to get an amendment passed that says that anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism.
Right, the resolution.
So that's not only does she stand on ceremony with that particular issue, but she actually stood on the steps of Congress. If you saw the clip on CNN where she said, if you don't sign on to this, you don't have a soul. And there are some deep-rooted bigoted overtones that come with that statement.
See, how is there nobody went up and said, you are insane, and how did all these people sign this? Well, there's some people abstained, but still, that's pathetic.
It's one thing if people are quiet, and a lot of people tend to be quiet. Why do you think people are quiet when it comes to somebody like her that breaches the line so deliberately and hurts the Jewish people in such untold ways?
I mean, I think part of this has to do with this sense of loyalty and betrayal, the balance of loyalty and betrayal within the Jewish community ourselves. Like, I don't know if y'all have been called capos or traitors or told.
Oh yeah, I'm the same as I turned in my Jewish friends and family to the Nazis. Yes, I'm that.
Yeah, correct. I've also been called a capo constantly. And there's this sense of, if you want to avoid being called a capo, you certainly can't criticize other Jewish voices on this. And then there's the kind of Gentile or non-Jewish community saying that if anyone criticizes a Jewish voice on this, they're being anti-Semitic. So either you're a traitor or you're an anti-Semite. And I think that's just being very effectively weaponized in sort of the cultural milieu in our discourse. And so that's why people like Debbie Wasserman-Schultz can get away with saying horrific things, because the older generation of Jews who are very sort of respectability politicking at this time don't want to come off as traitors, and they want to, allow for some dissent, which is itself very Jewish. And then the population outside of the Jewish community is concerned that criticizing a very well-known Jewish voice in Congress is going to be perceived automatically as anti-Semitic. And there's just so little latitude for dissent. And fortunately, I think the groundswell and the sort of tsunami of dissent is rising enough now that paradigm is shifting, where people can say, actually, anti-Zionism is not anti-Semitism. And because we've been saying this for 3 months and not 3 minutes, it has a little bit more heat to it and more weight to it. Whereas initially people would write that off and say, that's a fairly radical opinion. And so the perspectives that were seen as radical, October 10th, 11th, 12th, are now being seen as much more normative and central to the dialogue.
So, but it's just upsetting to me when I see her, because I feel like that's a representative of Jewish community. This is somebody who is in a very high position in our country that is representing Jews. And it's very upsetting to me that there's no, and by the way, there's 35 Jews in Congress, 35 or 38.
Listen, when you find
and not one of them is, no, that's, wait, the one girl, where is she from? She's from like Massachusetts or something. She begins with a B or Maine, but she at least didn't sign the thing. But it's like these people, nobody's standing up, but nobody was, how come there wasn't a single Jew in Congress standing with Rashida Tlaib?
There is a friend who, we're friendly with a handful of congressional representatives, more specifically their staff. And I've spoken to a few of them, and one in particular admitted that, we just don't want to feel the heat from DFI and
AIPAC and
DMFI, and of course from Dr. Evil himself, Mr. ADL Greenblatt. And so by that measure, it becomes, well, we want to say the right thing, but we know that they will have no hesitation to dump $5 to $10 million into a congressional race against us. We just had on Hill Harper, who's running for the Senate in Michigan, and he admitted that, one of the biggest donors to AIPAC offered me $20 million to run for Congress against Rashida Tlaib. Like, that's how serious this is getting. But it also speaks to the level of desperation that I think they're getting to. When they have to put that much money on the table in order to protect their cause.
I think they're desperate. Good.
I think that in the long run, it's a failing experiment. It's not going to work forever. It may. I made a New Year's prediction. I said, I think one person is going to break through in 24 that's going to be a real voice against the genocide, that's going to make it to Capitol Hill and is not going to give a flying F about the consequences of whether somebody comes after them or not. But I also think that one of the people that are there right now is going to get picked off. One of them is going to get picked off and get knocked out.
It's unfortunate.
But
statistically speaking, it's likely.
But if they have
money in a direction,
if they have to spend tens of millions of dollars to play whack-a-mole, I don't know how long they're going to want to do that. And especially since Claudine Gay is now out, and now you've got Neri Oxman, who is Bill Ackman's wife, who they are proving is basically doing the exact same thing. You will not be able, when the people eventually figure out the game, when the majority of people figure out the game, you can't put the cat back in the box. You can't do it.
Yeah, the coffers will eventually run out. And I do think, too, you need these two archetypes for like public focus. You need the sacrificial lamb of the person who said the right thing and was kicked out, and you need sort of the hero or that Herculean figure to come in and fight the good fight. And I do think we're going to see both of those things in 2024.
I hope so. I hope so. And I am personally not, I reject it now. I will reject it loudly, openly, in public, in front of other people. I really don't care. I am so sick of people using things. And I, again, will say anybody who thinks that one group's freedom implies your group's genocide, seek help.
Yeah.
Get some help. Look, Kath, and do you want Katherine or Kate? I didn't even think to say in the beginning.
My friends call me Katie, and we're friends now. So Katie.
Okay, so I call you Katie. So, it's like, get some help, right? Like this is all to me very projectionist, all of it. Yeah. It's, we feel so threatened that these people are going to kill us that it justifies us killing them. And yet, in history, the killing came from in the places you were leaving to come there because that's where it was safe, right? So it's so irrational.
Yeah, it's the internalization of white supremacy too. And I keep asking the question of who is telling you that it's kill or be killed? Who is feeding you the mythology that your only option is kill or be killed? And is it the arms dealers? Like, literally, is it the arms dealers? Are they the people that are benefiting from the mass production of weapons, from this genocide ongoing? Is it the people who are going to buy the beachfront property who are telling you that it's kill or be killed? Like, I know that follow the money has been a really anti-Semitic dog whistle in the past, and I want to name that. And at the same time, in our current global politics, see who is financially benefiting from the mythology that you are at risk of death. And I think some of this cognitive dissonance has been so obvious to me because in the same breath, people are saying to me, Israel is the only safe space in the world to be Jewish. The only place you can safely be Jewish is in Israel. And also, you're so safe, protected, and privileged in the United States as a diaspora Jew. And I'm like, which one is it then? This is another mythology that directly contravenes itself. Am I only safe in the US because I'm so privileged and protected here and I should know what it's like to be at risk in Israel? Or is Israel the only safe zone?
Right. It is. I mean, look, once I peeled the first layer back like 10 years ago, the constant contradictions. And at one point I remember actually just literally just sitting there and thinking, yeah, I can't do this anymore. I cannot. It's mental gymnastics at a level that just, but most of the people choose to be willfully ignorant as well, so as to not challenge their beliefs.
Here's my bow on the whole thing. Jews are disproportionately a culture that has a lot of wealthy people in it. And by that measure, this has always been a class war, nothing more. Most of the issues that we see in society today, whether it's the fact that we don't have health care, we don't have a living wage, we don't have a thriving labor force, we have a crumbling economy, a burning planet, and a foreign policy that is worse than anything the Cold War could have ever imagined back in the 1950s and 1960s. And so as a result, we are where we are now. We're basically repeating the same pattern, only now it's infinitely worse because people are, if anybody would ask me, like, who is the one world leader who I actually would fear? Everyone likes to talk about Putin and, Assad and people like that. But Trump. If you were to ask me one person on the planet who I think would drop a nuke right now, it's Netanyahu. I think Netanyahu would drop a nuke if he had to.
He's
that type of sick fuck that I actually think would do that. And I think we can close the conversation on this issue, which is not being talked about anywhere near at the length that it needs to be talked about. It's the fact that the next level of the Nakba has already been completed. Northern and mostly southern Gaza has now been completely destroyed. And why was it destroyed? Well, it just so happens that there's trillions in that natural resource called natural gas that is under the soil and now is basically being sent out to, you guessed it, 5 corporations, mega corporations that are controlled by the United States through NATO. So for anybody who is looking at any of the conflicts, and you know which ones I'm talking about that are going on in Europe right now, don't think for a second that you're smarter than what the people who run the entire show are thinking, because they know what they're thinking, which is we're going to dress this up as it was Hamas's fault, and now we have to fight back. And now we have to kill all these people. And by the way, that nice pipeline we're drilling right through the ground where we're going to get about $1 trillion some odd dollars out of this natural resource? Yeah, don't pay any attention to that.
I'm just scared there's no way to ever fix this.
I think that
how do we fix this? Like, that's the thing. Like, I don't see what to do. These people, and the idea that they're trying to send them places is so infuriating. I just
let's not worry about that right now. Katie, can you talk about the economic component to this? I think a lot of people just want to pretend isn't really happening.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head, really, with the natural resources, the trade canal, beachfront property, as I've said before. Gaza has so much wealth to offer Israel and the Western world that this is so clearly a calculation of blood to money, of how many people are we willing to murder, how much genocide are we willing to perpetrate in order to gain access to the economic privilege and gains that we'll then be able to disseminate. It is another exercise in white supremacy. It is ethnic cleansing for the sake of the dollar. It's horrifying to witness. I think you're correct. Like, this is the cynical and also the true way of looking at it. People will often say that, like, cynicism and pessimism is unhelpful. But I think in order to realistically combat the evils and sort of the amorality that we're seeing in global politics, we have to take the most cynical perspective, which is often the truest one. And I wish I were being dramatic, but I don't think that I am. I really think this is a money grab, and it's blood money, and the West is okay with that.
I think we are an extremely naive, privileged, and self-centered nation. There are many reasons for that, not the least of which is every Tom, Dick, and Harry that thinks that they are okay with determining whether or not a war should continue for the most pointless reasons possible. Let me assure you that the second a missile is pointing at you and could rain holy hell all over you, you'll quiver in a corner like nobody's business.
Let them keep poking Hezbollah. Yeah. Let them keep poking at Hezbollah. I mean, I feel like they're going to be looking at launching, having a missile land in the middle of Haifa.
Well, that's what
I mean. They can do that. They can reach. My understanding is they can even reach Tel Aviv.
But that is the danger of Netanyahu and what he represents, and that guard of the global ruling class, in the sense that they're convinced, probably to the degree that Biden really isn't the president. It's Anthony Blinken who really is in charge, and that they can draw him in if, in fact, the attack on Beirut, because they were knocking off, a leader in Hamas.
But they can't be that precise in Gaza, apparently.
No.
Apparently, you can only use that precision in other places.
But if you draw Hezbollah into this equation, this could become World War III so quickly in a capacity that I don't think anybody's really prepared for, whether it's Israel or us. And who is going to step up and say enough is enough? I just don't know.
No.
And that's the real fear.
Well, I think too, we've already sort of passed that threshold. I know people talk about nuclear threat as though that is the sort of maximum threat that people can experience. But I want to remind, especially folks listening, that Israel has already dropped the tonnage equivalent of multiple atomic bombs on Gaza. Nuclear threat has already happened. Like the difference between bombs that are, not H bombs versus a nuclear weapon, it's sort of semantics at this point. The population, 30,000 people have already died and Gaza has been flattened.
The one thing that I will mention before you go, obviously the second rally for Gaza is taking place this weekend in DC. I believe Dr. West is going to be there.
Yes, he said, well, that's what
And now the big question is Dr. West going to be a speaker at that rally? Now, if he's a speaker at that rally, if he wants to really put a shot in the arm in his presidential aspirations as an independent candidate, that's the opportunity that he
needs. It looks, he's been promoting it, so it looks like he's definitely planning on marching, whether or not he's a speaker, but he's already come out. He's very...
But he needs to have that signature moment because there's nobody, whether it's Biden, whether it's the two candidates in addition that are running in the Democratic primary, whether it is Trump, but who the hell knows what he's the ultimate wild card. And then, of course, you have RFK, who can be right on so many issues, but so wrong. Dead wrong on this issue.
And then again, I reiterate, don't forget, Jill Stein is at least, I know that I'll have a green option, even if Cornel West can't get on our ballot.
Well,
I just don't know what's going to happen.
But you can't compare a candidate like a Jill Stein to a candidate like a Cornel West.
No,
Cornel
but she's
West
just, I know she's pro-Palestinian.
Cornel West is a dynamic figure who can actually bring the necessary groundswell of attention to this issue that is desperately needed right now in a presidential election year. So. Because
are you a supporter of Dr. West's?
I just actually had a talk with him in Detroit a few weeks ago. I really love his politics.
Yeah. Oh, so wait a minute. So wait, were you at that speech that he gave in Dearborn?
I was the speaker right prior to him.
Okay, that's awesome.
Okay, I have to say, I've heard a lot of political speeches in my life. That's up there with the best I've ever heard. That's how good that was. That was very,
he had
very
the whole room on its feet. It was really spectacular to watch.
He's awesome. I'm a monthly supporter to him. Everyone knows, that's who I support. But I also am realistic as to I live in Florida and who knows what'll be on my ballot. So
you're totally going to support me and you're going to like it. Believe
whatever.
Me.
So I support the Cornel West campaign. Whether or not I'll get to vote for him is another story. See, now you've inspired the problem. Oh, good God.
I just want to come on here and say you're a really lovely lady. You might want to come to Mar-a-Lago sometime. It's a really great place, especially in the winter.
Why don't you just invite her to Epstein's Island?
I have never been to such a terrible place, and I have already made it very clear. He was a business partner, nothing more. He was a really creepy guy. I like the young girls. I'm not into girls that young. You're pretty.
You were into your own daughter.
Have you seen my daughter? My daughter's gorgeous, but not in this lifetime. Anyway, I just want to come on and shoot my shot. You're a great gal. Make sure you give me a call. Really appreciate you. I still love you all. Bye, guys.
Oh my God, it's the hands. It's the hands.
Isn't that funny?
It was bonkers.
With the big head too, right? So it even really makes the hands look really small. I know, it's totally.
And that's why, and I get so frustrated when people say, "Oh, well, if Trump was there, he would just do the same thing." Honestly, he may, but he's also the type of guy who would, after a few weeks, be like,
"All right, this isn't working. Yeah, people are not liking it.
We totally have to stop.
Maybe, but I don't know. I think, look, he's the one who moved the embassy. Let's let's
never forget that.
Thank you so much, Katie, for coming on and sharing your time with us. And I was right
switched
that
your name. I adjusted it for you.
Well, now she's a friend. But so but you also said but you do singing or poetry or something like that. What's your thing?
Yeah, so I am a musical theater kid. So I was classically trained as a vocalist for about 10 years, and I do sing. I also write a lot of poetry. I'm working on my debut novel right now, which is a fun erotic novel. And when I'm not a trauma therapist, I'm also a sex researcher and a sex educator. So that's like the balanced kind of fun, sexy part of my work.
I think it's awesome. I find you lovely, and I like watching you on Instagram, and I appreciate that. And I won't comment because I don't get into it on there, but I am watching. I'm watching.
Yeah. Well, we're going to make some clips. We're going to do some shorts. If there's anything that you'd be willing
promote anything you want to promote.
Anything you'd be willing to promote on your channel or would be willing to post on your Instagram page, that would be awesome. But the floor is yours. How can people find you? How they can support your work?
Yeah, absolutely. So my Instagram is at k.w.bogan. If you see any other iterations, kwbogan7, kwboganx, whatever, they're not me. There have been a lot of fake accounts cropping up. So just k.w.bogan. And then my TikTok handle is Sexuality Scholar. And I will say the silencing and shadow banning on social media has been really bonkers recently. My Instagram is reaching like a quarter as many people. My TikTok has been like fully shadow banned, so it's reaching about 100th as many people as it was before. Share, and hopefully that'll help lift some of the shadow bans. I will also say, if you're not currently following any of the journalists on the ground in Gaza, whether it's Motaz or Plestia or Bisan or some of the folks who have been doing really incredible journalistic work, please follow them before you follow me. Obviously, follow me, that's great, but I think the folks who have a lot of corrective information and impactful information to contribute right now are Chazan journalists, and I'm just here to boost as much as possible.
Yeah, but we got to promote you. Look, you're talking about what offends people more, the anti-Zionism or the queer sex? Because I got to know, I think that those both might be equally offensive to the same people. I don't know. I'm just saying, like, it's just, you're really in an interesting area there.
Just live and let live. Let people do whatever the fuck they want.
Correct. Yeah,
thank you so much.
A controversial figure, but that's okay. That's what.
I like it. You're adorable. Thank you, Katie.
It was so nice to meet y'all. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Katie.
Bye.
So that was a lovely conversation.
Lovely.
And of course, it is important that you have a big platform to talk about this issue because they will suppress it. And as Katie's alluded to, we've had this problem on our channel for a long time. They shadow ban the shit out of us.
Oh, we started off with a bang our first year. I held a telethon for Julian Assange, and that was basically set the standard for them banning us.
I'm not even kidding. We had a clip recently that I just checked that has like 120 views on it. It has 40 likes on it. It's like it's an absurd ratio that would never exist if they weren't deliberately trying to make sure that people couldn't see it.
Yeah,
because I've seen videos with 100,000 likes, 100,000 views, and it's got 5,000 likes. That type of thing is a serious problem.
So, but I want to go back 1 second to something that Katie said. So yeah, I agree. And the people that I do follow on Instagram, I follow all of those people. There are a handful, although we're losing them by the day. Apparently there were now at 109 journalists have been killed in Gaza.
Yeah, but they died doing something noble, Jen,
Meanwhile, I'm such a gringo, I can't say his name. The gentleman who's the Al Jazeera journalist, and his oldest, he had already lost his wife, 2 of his children, and a grandchild back in October. Then he lost his cameraman and was also injured in November. And now his oldest son, who was also a journalist, was just killed. And these people are still actually reporting what's going on the ground there. So, you know what I'm going to do? The next time we come on, I'm going to make sure to have, because I have like a handful of them that I'll just make sure to put their handles in the description. But Bisan, she's amazing. And look, these people now have more followers than Joe Biden, primarily because they're infinitely smarter and more interesting to watch than Joe Biden. And that would be even if there weren't a genocide happening.
See, I told you I was right.
What about her?
Well,
what about her?
It's cabbage patch.
Oh, it's just not good.
Donald James, thank you for being an amazing supporter 1 month in. Happy to have you. Really means a lot.
Definitely.
Big dumb animal. Thank you for the $4.99.
We love you, big dumb animal.
Really appreciate it. For those of you who want to support our small but mighty channel, as you know, we are heavily suppressed, but we're heavily thankful for everything that you're willing to do. Remember Cash App, $Gen Change.
But we get some seriously good guests.
Yes, we do.
And we get good guests even though we're small.
Support the channel by going to patreon.com/generational change. For as little as $5 a month, you can become a supporter of our small but mighty channel. And you get to talk to Jen directly
on Patreon. And by the way, Chip, I haven't looked on a couple of days, but I do know that you sent me a message. I haven't checked. I'm sorry. This weekend, there was a lot of football. But anyway.
Yeah,
I will get on my Patreon communiques. But yeah, guys, if anybody wants to communicate with me directly, got to pay to play. No, just seriously. Joking, but in seriously, because Peter does social media and also does the emails. The only way, like, if you, I'm the only person that does Patreon. So if you join on Patreon and send me a message in Patreon, I'm the only person who sees it.
So it was not a very good night for the Miami Dolphins. It was a great game, and their defense was fantastic.
I'm so happy anyway. It doesn't matter.
Yeah,
I couldn't be happier. I have a team. I got a coach. That's all I need. Look, we're Dolphins fans. We have a low bar of happiness.
A couple things I will say about the game. I think that the Dolphins would have won if they didn't give up that 95-yard punt return. That was the play of the game. It absolutely swung momentum away. I thought that the Bills were going to lose the game because they were driving at the end of the half, and the Dolphins stopped them at the half-yard line.
I would like to say, and I'm not a big person of like reasons and excuses, we do have a lot of injuries.
You do. And I was going to say, when two of your three most important offensive players are on
because you
the
had
bench,
Waddle and Mostert were out, and then also we have like serious defense problems.
And Tyreek is banged up. And so ultimately...
And can we talk about the snap thing again? I feel like I've been watching snap problems from the very first game of the season, and it's every game I notice at least a couple of times where it's just, what the hell? And I think that's because we're on like a third string of somebody somewhere that's probably not in the groove. And yeah, so we have some injuries.
Shout out to our friend India Walton, diehard Buffalo Bills fan. We're certainly happy for her, and she was obviously celebrating last night.
Yeah.
But ultimately,
stuff your celebration in a sack, India.
Yeah, you guys will really imagine if
I would be totally like if I were on social media, I'd really be smacking talk.
I would say that the only odds of this happening is if the Dolphins, who are going to Kansas City, and I actually think the Dolphins could win that game.
I'm not.
They're going to need obviously Waddle and Mostert to be playing. My guess is that they will, but we'll see. And of course, the Pittsburgh Steelers. Well, actually, no. How would it work? How would it? Wait, no.
Actually, Baltimore goes to Pittsburgh.
Yeah, no.
Or Pittsburgh goes to Baltimore.
No. Baltimore's on the bye. So the only way that the Dolphins and the Bills. The only way the Dolphins and the Bills could play again is actually in the AFC title game. Like, that's the only way it could happen. With that said,
I honestly believe that if we had our full, whole, healthy team and their full, whole, healthy team, that we could probably win.
I think, well, yes, but I still think you should have won the game last night. And ultimately, the biggest issue, and I've been saying it for a while with the Dolphins, I think the Dolphins actually have a very good team, and I think they have a very, very good coach. The problem is that Tua's undersized. And the interceptions, interceptions that he throws are always sideline to sideline. That is where he gets picked. He doesn't get picked over the middle of the field because he's actually pretty accurate. But when he has to view the field from a certain angle,
he can't see it.
He can't see it. And that happened twice when I was at the Meadowlands earlier this year.
He's height challenged.
The pick he threw last night was the exact same type of route that the corners or the safeties will play. They'll just come over the top and they'll pick him. And that's how basically every interception he's thrown all year is the same thing every time.
Or maybe he needs some lifts or something.
Travers, I wouldn't expect anything less. And you haven't seen Ace Ventura, have you?
No.
You've got to see it.
That's never happening.
You've got to see it.
That's not happening. That's
Einhorn is a man. Okay,
can I please tell you that I don't find anything about any of that funny.
You don't like him, or you?
I don't even. Well, no. I actually like Jim Carrey. I don't like those characters. Yeah, I don't like that. Like, I wouldn't see Dumb and Dumber. I love The Truman Show. I've liked Jim Carrey multiple times and things, but I don't like the stupid humor. That's not me. I didn't see Mask. I don't like none of that's my. It's not my thing.
The Mask. There was a movie called Mask.
Well, that was awesome. I didn't see The Mask. Right? Yeah, that was a good movie. I didn't see.
It was good because it was based on Bruce Springsteen. That's a joke. I'm just kidding.
Ridiculous.
But it turns out that he really was a big fan of Bruce Springsteen. Like, that was why it played such a role.
Oh, and you know what else had a lot of songs in that movie? It was Bob Seger.
Yes, that's true.
I know.
That's true. Well, Bob Seger's great. Just put your old records on the shelf. That's all you got to do. So we will address this story before we go.
What story? What do we have to address?
We're going to address Mr. Williams.
See, okay, let me preface this. And he could vouch for me. I don't care about talking about this. I'm not interested in it. I don't understand why anybody's interested in it. But apparently this is something that's newsworthy, and so we have to address it.
I don't know how long you made this column.
So many things I should know, and they all know it. They all know it. Why? Because you don't make me the villain. Not the guy that raises black children and ain't never done a hard drug in his life and don't have no stories of doing nobody dirty. And they'll just go out and they'll lie. The industry doesn't mess with Katt because he didn't show up for the studio. No studios have ever said that. Look at my IMDb.
So I'm taking them at face value.
These are this is like Steve Harvey telling people he used to be homeless. That's my story. That's not his story. Steve Harvey wasn't never homeless. When Mark Curry was touring with him 25 years ago, he was making $3,000 a show in cash and doing 5 shows a week. They just tell the stories. Thanks to my wife, I'm where I am. You said that about the first wife. You forget that? You told us it was her. Then you went and married somebody else that think like a man. Like, what are you talking about? They think they can rewrite history. Guy Torrey did a beautiful special about the Comedy Store and Fat Tuesday, where he said that Steve and Cedric and Kevin Hart and Tiffany Haddish came through there and made all lies. They canceled me for talking about Harvey Weinstein before the thing came out, but he offered to suck my penis in front of all my people at my agency. What am I supposed to do? He did all of that. I'm thinking I'm the only black person on the script. I get there, it's 3 other black guys on there. Woo. Huh.
So you wonder what they did to get there.
It's a very good point. And he also brings up Diddy. The reason why I wanted to play this clip, and there's a little bit more to it, is that there is this sort of rite of passage in the entertainment world that people really don't want to talk about. Now,
being molested by Harvey Weinstein?
Well, that's just one. Just one. That's
Apparently,
just one.
Yeah.
There are many layers to these types of stories. But I will tell you that when it comes to Harvey Weinstein, I knew about Harvey Weinstein like 15 years ago. And the reason I knew about him is because I have a friend. We don't communicate as much anymore because he actually lives in China now. But he was somebody who was a producer, and he actually got fairly high up in terms of his network. And it was a known thing that Harvey Weinstein is a sexual predator and abuser. And this was back in like 2008, 2009.
I knew something was very weird going on. I didn't know who the person was, but I knew something was very weird going on with a whole bunch of young women that were basically the same generation of women. It's the casting couch. But I mean, when and these are women that are like my age or maybe a few years older than me. So it was like Uma Thurman, Mira Sorvino. Like there were certain women that just sort of disappeared.
Yeah.
That disappeared or were written off as being difficult, or they were like the things came out about them and just weird things. And I started noticing this trend. I think it was Ashley Judd. There was like a bunch of these women of that same age group that were basically ostracized at different points in time over a period of about 5 years. And I started thinking something's very weird here. Mm-hmm. I didn't know that it was Harvey Weinstein because I didn't know the name, but I knew something was going on.
Yeah, there's no question that it was definitely, his abusive tendencies were along the lines of a pervert. Like that was a huge part of it. But there's many different reasons why people have these power trips when they are in positions of authority.
Sharon Stone. That's another. Yeah.
Sharon Stone was blacklisted, and you know why Sharon Stone was
Amber Heard has no sympathy from anything. She can go F herself.
The reason why Sharon Stone was blacklisted is because Sharon Stone at one time was the hottest in more ways than one commodity in Hollywood, and this was between probably 1990 and 1994. I would say.
Right after Basic Instinct.
Yeah, and basically the last hurrah that she had as an actress, believe it or not, was her best role, and that was in Casino. And probably the reason why these things happen is because she wouldn't fuck any of the executives, and once that happens, it's like, oh well, okay. Well, you've had your fun and now you can go away. And that's basically what ends up happening in many instances. And that's only the instances of women being abused. How about men that get abused?
I remember what Corey Feldman has said many times.
Corey Feldman said, and I quote, that Charlie Sheen raped Corey Haim on the set of Lucas back in 1986. And yet people still want to pretend like this shit didn't go down at the time.
What happens is that the whistleblower gets the blacklist.
Correct. The whistleblower. And of course, Corey Haim ended up, rest in peace. There was a guy who you could tell was severely abused.
Oh my God.
He got so heavily into drugs and could never get his life straight. And you know that this is going to eat at Feldman for the rest of his life because he was very tight with him.
But you have to assume, like for every route you see, there's 50 you don't. So that was obviously
Correct.
just rampant. That was just running rampant through Hollywood. The truth is, it probably still is. Because I feel like there's always going to be, the underground will always go deeper. No matter how much you clear of the underground, they'll go deeper. But
it's the price for fame in so many instances. I saw a movie a number of years ago that some of you may still remember. It was called 8mm with Nicolas Cage. This was back in '99, I want to say. It was
Brendan Fraser too.
Brendan Fraser was abused. There is no question that this is a serious problem. And if you think it's a serious problem in the white community, imagine what it's like in the black community, where you're basically told to shut your mouth and not even talk about it. Like that's not what a man does. Terry Crews came out and admitted, big buff Terry Crews said that I was abused. This shit's real. And Katt Williams has 0 F's to give, and I applaud him because there's a little bit more to this. So we'll continue.
Told him no, what y'all do? And this is why when I walk in a room, heads go down.
You see Jonathan Majors, what he went through, Marvel dropped him as soon as the conviction came out, and you were telling the
Hey, you saw that black woman come get his charge cut in half? Thank you, Megan Good. God bless you, coming to save that slave. If he'd had to be there by himself, he was getting all four. Guilty, 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 guilty. She came in there, was just so beautiful, they had to knock half of it off. Bless his heart. It's just work ethic. And not the work ethic they talk about. They tell you work ethic where they do all these movies. I'm the hardest working man. Well, no, everybody goes to work every day.
Right.
Yeah. I'm saying, I go to work all the time. Everybody who works goes to work every day. Shut up. Shut up. You get, what? You think I respect you more than my gardener? I don't. I don't. He work every day. Rain or shine. These people are not powerful. Satan can't create anything. That includes blessings for his people. That's why, you know what the #1 job of somebody that sold their soul in Hollywood is?
What?
Is to act like it didn't happen.
That's pretty...
That's the most powerful.
That is, like, the best way to sell... That's what happens when you sell your soul to Hollywood. You make it
know that it's going down, and you are aiding and abetting the crime. I've always felt in many ways, and you tell me if you think different, but I've always felt that the people who allow the crime to go on are the ones who are actually worse.
It's bad, and there were definitely a lot of enablers and people around people like Harvey Weinstein and whoever else is in that, community. They definitely have people enabling their behavior and covering for them.
I think it also comes full circle with the whole conversation about what's going on, in the Middle East, and specifically what's happening in Gaza and the West Bank. You've all seen the video of the big schlub who has been interviewed multiple times. Well, if I didn't take that person's house, somebody else was going to take it. So basically, you're justifying your apartheid and genocide because if you don't do it, somebody else is going to do it. It's really terrible that these actors and actresses get abused. They go on the casting couch and then they constantly have to be doing things. And by the way, if there's one person I want to really tip my hat to Katt Williams on for calling out, Diddy. Somebody finally had to do it. And thank you for really blowing the lid in more ways than one as far as Diddy's concerned. Because that son of a bitch, he's been doing his thing for a long time. He got away with basically putting a gun to a person's head when he was with J-Lo back in, I want to say it's 2000, 2001. He should have in New York, he should have went to prison for 15 to 20 years, but that didn't happen because when you're in positions of authority, you're able to get away with things like that. Whereas Plexico Burress, who was forgive me for making this a sports transition, when he was the top wide receiver on the New York Giants back in 2008, he was in a club and he had a gun on him and the gun ended up going off and shooting himself and he ended up fleeing. And he still got 4 years as a result. He didn't try to hurt anybody. He just got that for having it happen in a public place.
But he wasn't Diddy.
He wasn't Diddy. And there's a lot of questions people still have to this day about Diddy when it comes to both.
My thing with him is the amount of name change. Anybody who changes their name so many times, with the exception of
Prince. How did I know you were going to say that?
The exception of Prince.
Well, of course, Diddy changed his name like 4 times thinking he is Prince. But the thing is about Diddy, and I could say this freely, he is a talentless hack. He just happened to have been in the right place at the right time.
Unlike Prince.
Unlike Prince. Prince has real talent and always did.
Yeah.
I mean, had real talent.
Yeah.
And that is the whole thing about all of these. Did he do it?
Oh, we're so.
As far as I know, he
amused.
may have, he may not.
What do we have coming up on Thursday?
We don't have it planned as of yet, but I'm trying to get Ryan Grimm to confirm. So we'll see if that ultimately comes to pass.
Do you know if you want to do it in the afternoon or
hasn't announced yet, and I think we have something scheduled for the following Monday, I believe.
What do we have the
Could be
following
wrong.
Monday? Well, not on my calendar, so you haven't put it in here if you did.
Did I or did I not? Let me see. No, not yet. Okay, but we have something for the 18th.
What do we
So
have?
that's the following Thursday.
Okay, yeah, we do have Project Censored's State of the Free Press. And I have gotten the book in the mail, so we got to look through that. But yeah, Project Censored puts out every year a compilation of stories that were undercovered, improperly covered, and it's called Project Censored's State of the Free Press, and it is the one for this year. So we'll be going over that. It's always some interesting stuff in there. Go figure, we're not being told accurate information.
No surprise. No surprise.
So, but we don't know exactly what's happening on Thursday. Something will happen.
It always does.
Something always happens. But it would be great if we got to talk to Ryan Grimm. You know, he's recently been in some really high places and get some commentary about that.
Travers, Chris Garrett, Donald James, Bass Chad, Thunderjock, Tony D.
And even Bill Bradley, who was telling me how ahistorical our conversation was and was telling me that the Nakba didn't happen until after something, which is just completely inaccurate. And but thank you.
Carla Harrington, Michael Cooper, Leftist Best Politics, all of you guys.
Thank you, guys.
It's been a very lively chat this Monday afternoon. Sable, thank you for checking in. Always good to see you, Sable Miner.
Hold on a second. Can I see something?
Big Dumb Animal, of course, with the
I want to see something.
lovely contribution.
I want to see. Okay. So I did this. So guys, we've been talking about my news sources and what I want. This is like my daily kind of news rotation. And then after that, then I go through and listen to other commentators. I listen to people like Kim Iverson or Tim Black or whatever. But this is, and I think I put 10 there, right? Is that 10? These are my top 10, Jen's top 10 news sources on YouTube. So guys, if you're just listening, it's Democracy Now!, PBS NewsHour, Status Coup, Breakthrough News, The Real News Network, People's Dispatch, Novara Media, Telesur Media, The Gray Zone, and The Electric Intifada. And I basically hit every continent as best as I can with this. And Novara is a new one that I have found. It's in the UK and it's exceptionally good.
For those of you who don't know Telesur Media, if you've never seen any of the exposés done by Abby Martin, highly recommend. Some really amazing stuff put out there.
And Abby Martin is somebody that would be like when I go through and start looking at like analysis things, you know, you have Empire Files and stuff like that. But guys, these are my news sources. There you go.
Smash that like button, share, subscribe, do all those things we so gratefully appreciate you doing. Thank you all so very much. We'll see you Thursday.